Now, for more insights into the bilateral relations between China and the Philippines, we're joined by Sourabh Gupta, Senior Asia-Pacific International Relations Policy Specialist at the Institute for China-America Studies. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, for people who are trying to understand the nature of Chinese-Filipino relations, what's the significance of Duterte choosing to visit now?
It's very significant that he has chosen to go to China this early in his presidency. Now, understand the Philippine presidency is a one-term presidency. He is in his honeymoon period. This is his signature country with which he wants to deepen ties, and he has chosen to do so early. He has made all these statements in the course of choosing to visit China.
Now, in terms of expectations, what are they looking to achieve with this visit?
I think what we have seen so far is that they have already met the expectations of the visit. The expectations and the hope was that, of course, they could have some early harvest agreements in the economic sphere, but that they could set the correct tenor to their relationship so that they can deal with the challenges that they have in the South China Sea, which are very deep-seated challenges. And as President Duterte himself said, the relationship has set a sort of springtime tenor, and the period of deep freeze is over. And that, I think, is very important.
So that change of tone, clearly significant there. And speaking of the disputes in the South China Sea, what sort of economic impact has this dispute had on both countries?
Well, fortunately, the impact has not been too deep. The reason for that is, unlike in a place, say, like Ukraine, where matters have gotten kinetic, that has descended to armed hostilities, in China, in the South China Sea, it never came down to that. No shots have been fired, no lives have been lost. There have been a lot of tensions, but obviously there have been sanctions, and there has been some sanctions, small sanctions against, say, tropical fruits of the Philippines, which has been removed by the Chinese now. And a great money earner for many countries in that region is Chinese tourists visiting those countries. And once the tensions got underway, a lot of Chinese tourists just stayed away from Philippines. Now we will see again them going back to these countries and bringing in the revenue in.
And you mentioned tourism as an area of cooperation. What are some of the other sectors that you expect to see more collaboration on?
Where I expect to see more collaboration on is going to be in the infrastructure space down the line. Philippines is bang in the middle of the Maritime Silk Route and part of the Belt and Road Initiative of the Chinese. I envision a lot of money and investment coming in the area of urban transit, rail, power, et cetera, et cetera. But I would say that the jewel in the crown would be if China and the Philippines can cooperate on joint energy development in the South China Sea at some point of time. That was a reason for the breakdown of the tensions a couple of years back. If they can do that, they can show that they have opened a completely new chapter. But we must remember that that would be an apogee in terms of cooperation. We need to give it time to reach that point.
Now, as you said, this is still obviously the early stage in Duterte's presidency, but already today he said that he's separating himself from the US in his pivot towards China. How are other countries viewing this decision?
Other countries are viewing this some with trepidation and anxiety, but I would say most of the neighboring states with a degree of happiness and satisfaction. Nobody really wants the South China Sea area to break down into tensions and for wars or limited conflict to start. The countries in ASEAN were actually happy that once the arbitration ended, that a chapter had closed and a new chapter had opened, and they are trying to make the maximum gains from this process. There are some countries like Vietnam and maybe to some extent Singapore which feel that the Philippines has let down ASEAN unity on this front, but most of the ASEAN states are happy to see that they can open a new chapter and a productive chapter in ties with China, and with Duterte leading the way, it opens the door for them to also deepen their ties with China.
And you mentioned some countries perhaps not viewing this or viewing this with some sort of trepidation. What would their concerns be?
Their concerns are, and these should not be diminished, what went through at the Permanent Court of Arbitration was a thorough legal process. There is tremendous value in the rule of law in international society, and the verdict, however flawed it might have been, stands for the rule of law in international society. If that rule of law can be not dispensed but be sidestepped so easily, for many of the smaller countries in Southeast Asia or for the world, they look at law as a defense against big countries. And to that extent, they fear that giving up so easily on the results of the arbitration was not a wise idea from the point of view of entrenching international law in the body of international politics.
And just lastly, as you look at some of the key issues that perhaps still need more negotiation, more dialogue between China and the Philippines, what areas do you think they should be looking at?
Oh, absolutely. I would say the South China Sea dispute. The arbitration results are there as to certain areas where Chinese actions, even though it was a flawed process, may have transgressed what its rights are in those areas. There are areas, I can be very specific about this, with regard to the Scarborough Shoal, where the traditional Philippines fishermen should be allowed access. With regard to Second Thomas Shoal, whether China should move away its law enforcement activity.
Right.
There are multiple issue areas in the South China Sea which was at the heart of their quarrels.
Right.
And these are the issues that China and Philippines must sort out if they must transcend their relationship to a new phase. So it cannot just be about investment. You need to tackle the hard issues, and the hard issues were the South China Sea, sovereign rights, and territorial and jurisdictional quarrels.
Well, dialogue definitely seems to be heading in the right direction. We'll have to leave it there. Sourabh Gupta, Senior Asia-Pacific International Relations Policy Specialist at the Institute for China-America Studies. Thank you again.